The world has a way of testing every thought, every decision, every ounce of resolve you possess. And yet, most people crumble at the first sign of discomfort, at the hint of criticism, at the whisper of doubt. To become mentally invincible is not a matter of luck, nor is it about talent. It is about facing reality as it truly is and embracing the harsh truths that everyone else runs from. The first and most fundamental truth is that life owes you nothing. Every advantage you think you have, your upbringing, your education, your friends, even your luck, is temporary, fragile, and ultimately irrelevant unless you act with ruthless intention. To expect the world to favor you is to prepare yourself for endless disappointment. Those who thrive are those who take responsibility for their outcomes, who accept that setbacks, betrayals, and failures are inevitable, and who refuse to let external circumstances dictate their inner state. Understanding this begins the transformation from fragile to invincible. Second, humans are inherently predictable, and this predictability is your opportunity. People act out of fear, desire, and self-interest, often without even realizing it. Those who are mentally invincible recognize the patterns, the emotional triggers, and the hidden agendas that drive behavior. They do not take insults personally because they understand that most attacks are projections of weakness or insecurity. They do not expect loyalty because they know self-interest governs most relationships. And they do not seek validation because they have learned that external approval is fleeting and often manipulative. When you internalize these realities, you begin to move through life with clarity. You no longer react to every insult or setback. Instead, you assess, calculate, and respond strategically. Your mental energy becomes a weapon, not a liability. Third, emotional control is non-negotiable. Too many people are slaves to their feelings, reacting impulsively and allowing transient emotions to dictate long-term consequences. Anger, fear, envy, and even love can cloud judgment if you lack discipline. Mentally invincible individuals recognize emotions for what they are, signals, not commands. They observe them, understand their origin, and then choose their response deliberately. This does not mean suppressing emotions, it means mastering them. By controlling your inner state, you create a shield against the chaos of the outside world. You are unshaken by gossip, indifferent to provocation, and unmanipulable by deception. This mastery of self is the bedrock upon which all other invincible traits are built. Fourth, embrace discomfort. The majority of people spend their lives chasing comfort, avoiding pain, and seeking security. They avoid conflict, hide from responsibility, and flee from challenges. This instinct for comfort is natural, but it breeds weakness. Mental invincibility requires deliberate exposure to adversity, calculated risk-taking, and voluntary suffering. By pushing yourself beyond familiar boundaries, you forge resilience. Every moment of discomfort endured without complaint strengthens your mind, sharpens your focus, and builds an unbreakable core. This is why the most formidable individuals often come from backgrounds of hardship. Their challenges sculpted a mental armor that cannot be bought, only earned. Fifth, accept solitude. The ability to stand alone without seeking validation or companionship is a hallmark of mental invincibility. Human beings are social creatures, yet dependence on others for confidence or reassurance is a vulnerability. Those who are invincible find strength in solitude. They reflect deeply, strategize in silence, and cultivate an inner dialogue that is disciplined, rational, and unyielding. Solitude is not loneliness. It is the crucible where self-reliance is forged, where clarity emerges, and where decisions are made free from the interference of emotional contagion or popular opinion. Sixth, failure is a teacher, not a punishment. Those who fear failure are doomed to mediocrity, constantly constrained by the expectations of safety and comfort. Mentally invincible individuals do not worship success. They dissect failure, study it, and use it to sharpen their instincts. Every rejection, every loss, every humiliation carries a lesson about the human condition, about strategy, and about your own capabilities. The fear of failure is nothing more than an internalized weakness, a belief that the world owes you immunity from pain. Recognize it, confront it, and learn to leverage it. True invincibility is forged in the fires of repeated setbacks that refine, not destroy, the mind. Seventh, clarity of purpose shields you from distraction. Most people drift, influenced by trends, opinions, and temporary desires. Mentally invincible individuals have a purpose that is non-negotiable, a guiding principle that filters decisions, relationships, and actions. When you are clear about your mission, the noise of society becomes irrelevant. Gossip, envy, and petty competition cannot destabilize you because you are anchored in an internal compass that is impervious to external chaos. Discipline and focus naturally follow clarity, allowing you to conserve energy for what truly matters, while ignoring the illusions that consume weaker minds. Eighth, understand manipulation before attempting to influence. Every interaction carries the potential for psychological influence, and those who are invincible know both sides of the equation. They recognize when others attempt to manipulate them and see through false flattery, veiled threats, and emotional coercion. They also know how to strategically use influence themselves when necessary, not to dominate mindlessly, but to create outcomes in alignment with their purpose. Awareness of these dynamics does not breed paranoia, it breeds control. You are no longer a pawn in the schemes of the uninformed or the ambitious. You are the player, the strategist, and occasionally, the observer who chooses not to act until the perfect moment. Ninth, adopt a mindset of constant growth. Intellectual stagnation is mental vulnerability. Those who become invincible invest in themselves relentlessly, learning from books, mentors, experiences, and even enemies. Knowledge becomes a shield and a weapon. Insight allows anticipation where others are blind. Curiosity coupled with discipline ensures that your mind remains sharp, adaptable, and unpredictable. Those who neglect growth surrender their future to circumstance. They become easy prey to manipulation, deception, and their own unchallenged biases. Finally, cultivate detachment from outcomes. Most people are enslaved by results. They measure their self-worth by achievement, reputation, or approval. Mentally invincible individuals focus on effort, strategy, and integrity of action, understanding that outcomes are often influenced by forces beyond control. Detachment does not mean apathy. It means prioritizing process over vanity, principle over perception. By relinquishing obsession with outcomes, you achieve a freedom that others cannot comprehend. You act decisively, take bold risks, and remain undeterred by temporary losses because your mind is anchored in purpose, mastery, and self-reliance rather than fleeting validation. These 10 harsh truths, when internalized and practiced relentlessly, lay the foundation of a mind that cannot be shaken, manipulated, or broken. Mental invincibility is not a myth. It is a product of clarity, discipline, insight, and deliberate confrontation with reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. The first number of understanding invincibility is acceptance. The acceptance that life is indifferent, that people are predictable, that emotions must be mastered, that discomfort is necessary, and that solitude, failure, purpose, manipulation, growth, and detachment are your allies. This acceptance is uncomfortable, even brutal, but it is the price of true psychological strength. Those who endure it gain a mind that moves through the world like a blade through smoke, silent, sharp, and unstoppable. Number 2, the art of controlling the mind. Before the world controls. You to be mentally invincible, you must first understand that your mind is the battlefield before the world becomes one. Most people live their lives at the mercy of fleeting emotions, impulsive reactions, and external pressures, allowing every insult, every setback, and every unexpected turn to dictate their state. The truly strong recognize that the first conquest is internal, mastering the mind before attempting to master anything else. This begins with self-awareness, the uncomfortable acknowledgement of your weaknesses, fears, and insecurities. Mental invincibility is not about denial. It is about brutal honesty. You must see your mental blind spots clearly and face the truths you would rather ignore. Only then can you begin to wield your mind as a weapon rather than as a hostage. One crucial truth is that fear is the mind's most powerful adversary. Fear paralyzes, confuses, and corrodes clarity. Those who are mentally invincible confront fear deliberately. They analyze it, question its validity, and allow it to sharpen rather than weaken them. Fear is not a weakness to be eliminated, but a signal to be understood. Every time you face it consciously, you chip away at its power, transforming it into a tool for strategic advantage. It is no coincidence that the most influential figures in history, leaders, thinkers, and warriors, have leveraged fear not only externally but internally, converting their anxieties into precision, focus, and unyielding resolve. Another critical principle is detachment from opinion. The average person bends and twists according to societal expectations, rumors, and the judgments of others. Mentally invincible individuals are immune to these pressures because they understand that most opinions are superficial and temporary. Seeking validation from the uninformed is a surrender of power. The moment you liberate yourself from this dependence, your energy is redirected from pleasing others to cultivating mastery over yourself. You act in alignment with principle, strategy, and long-term vision, not in response to fleeting approval or criticism. This detachment does not breed isolation. It breeds clarity. Control over attention is equally essential. Your mind is constantly assaulted by distractions, social media, gossip, trivial arguments, and the endless noise of other people's insecurities. Those who are mentally invincible understand that attention is the currency of mental power. Where you place your focus determines your mental strength, your emotional state, and your effectiveness. Every distraction indulged is energy wasted. Every focus maintained is power accumulated. Cultivating selective attention allows you to rise above chaos, to act decisively in the midst of confusion, and to exploit opportunities invisible to distracted minds. Resilience is another pillar of the invincible mind. Life is designed to test endurance. Plans will fail, allies will betray, circumstances will shift. Most people crumble because they view adversity as a personal affront, allowing external events to dominate their inner equilibrium. Mentally invincible individuals view adversity differently, as a tool, a challenge, and a teacher. Setbacks are not evidence of inadequacy, they are evidence of opportunity. The ability to recover, adapt, and learn from failure is a defining characteristic of psychological strength. Resilience is not born from comfort. It is forged through deliberate exposure to challenges that would cripple weaker minds. Strategic emotional expression is another deceptively powerful tool. While most people react without thought, the mentally invincible know that emotions are instruments, not dictators. Displaying anger, joy, or sadness indiscriminately grants others the ability to manipulate, predict, and control you. Mastery of emotion means understanding when to reveal vulnerability, when to conceal intent, and when to create illusion. Emotional strategy is not about deception for the sake of malice. It is about maintaining autonomy, clarity, and influence over both the self and the situation. In every interaction, the mentally invincible assess not only content but tone, cadence, and unspoken signals, leveraging emotional insight to anticipate outcomes. A lesser-known truth is that attachment breeds weakness. People are tethered to possessions, relationships, and ideologies, allowing external entities to wield disproportionate power over their decisions. Mentally invincible individuals cultivate detachment without apathy. They form relationships and commitments, yet they remain unshaken by loss or change. Material objects, social status, and even reputation are tools, not lifelines. By freeing the mind from excessive attachment, they preserve clarity, reduce vulnerability, and maintain a posture of calculated autonomy. The recognition of human self-interest is another foundational truth. People act in ways that benefit themselves, often cloaked in altruism, loyalty, or friendship. Those who fail to understand this are blindsided repeatedly. Mentally invincible individuals operate with a clear-eyed view of motives, predicting behavior not through optimism, but through rational assessment. This does not foster cynicism. It fosters preparedness. When you expect people to act in alignment with self-interest, you are neither naive nor reactive. You are in control. You build alliances, negotiate influence, and protect yourself while remaining adaptive to the true nature of others. Self-discipline cannot be overstated. The ability to consistently regulate thoughts, actions, and impulses creates a fortress of mental strength. Discipline transforms knowledge into action, insight into execution, and intention into results. Without it, even the sharpest mind is wasted. Mentally invincible individuals design routines, enforce standards, and adhere to principles regardless of temporary discomfort. This relentless self-regulation becomes an invisible weapon, silently shaping outcomes while others succumb to laziness. distraction, and impulsivity. Finally, anticipation of consequence is the mark of a mind that cannot be broken. Those who are mentally invincible anticipate the ripple effects of every action, speech, and decision. They think 3, 5, or 10 steps ahead, modeling potential outcomes and preparing contingencies. This foresight shields against manipulation, miscalculation, and unforeseen adversity. By anticipating consequence, you reduce chaos to manageable variables, convert uncertainty into opportunity, and maintain composure where others are paralyzed by surprise. In essence, number 2 of becoming mentally invincible is about mastering the battlefield within: fear, opinion, attention, resilience, emotional strategy, detachment, understanding human self-interest, self-discipline, and anticipation of consequence form the architecture of an unshakable mind. Each principle is interdependent, reinforcing the others, creating a mind that moves deliberately, observes acutely, and reacts strategically. External chaos becomes irrelevant, manipulation becomes transparent, and temporary setbacks are absorbed rather than destabilizing. Those who cultivate these truths do not merely survive. They thrive with a quiet, lethal efficiency that the unprepared cannot comprehend. The mentally invincible understand that control of the mind precedes control of circumstance. They are unperturbed by insult, unshaken by betrayal, and undistracted by triviality. They have internalized reality as it is, stripped of comforting illusions, and forged a mindset that responds to life not with reaction, but with calculated action. This is the second step toward the full mastery of mental invincibility, the deliberate cultivation of a mind that rules itself before attempting to rule the world. Number 3, embracing reality, brutally and rejecting illusions. Mental invincibility is impossible without the uncompromising acceptance of reality. Most people wander through life cloaked in comforting illusions, telling themselves half-truths to soften the sting of failure, loss, and uncertainty. They cling to hope as a substitute for clarity, believing that denial can shield them from pain. But hope without analysis, optimism without strategy, and denial without acknowledgement are shackles, not protection. To be mentally invincible, you must face the world as it is, not as you wish it to be. This requires a stark, often uncomfortable confrontation with truth. Every lie you tell yourself, every comforting illusion you nurture, erodes your ability to act decisively, leaving your mind vulnerable to manipulation, distraction, and chaos. The first step is acknowledging your own limitations. Pride and arrogance make the mind fragile. They prevent honest assessment of skills, resources, and vulnerabilities. Those who are mentally invincible have the courage to admit their weaknesses, study them, and develop strategies to neutralize their impact. Recognizing that you cannot control everything and that your perception is fallible transforms humility into power. By confronting your limitations, you gain freedom to adapt, plan, and act without the burden of ego-driven blind spots. This self-honesty is not weakness. It is the foundation upon which unshakable mental strength is built. Another vital truth is the inevitability of adversity. Life does not conform to your expectations, and fortune is indifferent. Those who expect comfort, smooth paths, or fairness are destined to suffer disproportionately when reality strikes. Mentally invincible individuals internalize that hardship is constant, and they prepare themselves accordingly. This preparation is both mental and practical. They anticipate challenges, simulate scenarios of failure, and condition themselves to endure discomfort. Pain, setbacks, and unexpected complications are not disruptions to their trajectory. They are the forge in which their resilience is tempered. Accepting adversity before it arrives ensures that when it comes, it is met with strategy rather than panic. Control over desire is another critical factor. Humans are motivated, often irrationally, by longing for pleasure, security, and approval. Unchecked desire leads to distraction, impulsive decisions, and vulnerability. Mentally invincible individuals recognize desire as a tool, not a master. They discipline impulses, delay gratification, and channel cravings into productive action. Desire becomes a lever for focus rather than a chain for the mind. This mastery of internal drives allows them to operate in environments that overwhelm ordinary minds, maintaining clarity and composure even in the face of temptation and provocation. Understanding the fragility of perception is equally important. People interpret events subjectively, often through bias, emotion, or incomplete information. Mentally invincible individuals train themselves to observe without distortion, to separate fact from interpretation, and to recognize the difference between appearance and reality. This skill is not merely intellectual, it is strategic. Misperception creates vulnerability, while clarity of observation creates leverage. By seeing people, events, and circumstances as they truly are, you anticipate threats, exploit opportunities, and navigate complexity with precision. Isolation is another uncomfortable truth that must be embraced. The mentally invincible often appear aloof, distant, or indifferent, but this is not detachment for its own sake. It is protection. Social entanglements, dependence on validation, and emotional codependence dilute mental strength. By creating a mind that can stand alone, that does not collapse when alliances fail or friends betray, you achieve autonomy. This does not mean rejecting relationships entirely. It means approaching every connection with awareness and control, understanding that the mind's invincibility cannot be contingent upon another's presence or approval. The mastery of timing is also a crucial element. Those who are mentally invincible understand that action without context, speed without calculation, and persistence without adaptability are recipes for failure. They learn patience, reading the flow of events, and choosing the precise moment to act. Impulse, rush, or reaction without timing is the undoing of countless minds. Deliberate timing transforms effort into results, recognizing the rhythms of human behavior, the pace of circumstance, and the optimal juncture for decision-making converts uncertainty into power, allowing the mentally invincible to move with a quiet but unstoppable force. Another harsh truth is the inevitability of betrayal. Human loyalty is fragile, often conditional, and rarely permanent. The mentally invincible accept this reality without cynicism. They do not live in fear of betrayal, but they prepare for it. They protect themselves strategically, understanding that trust must be earned, monitored, and sometimes limited. This does not create paranoia, it creates readiness. By expecting betrayal as a possible constant, they prevent it from destabilizing their psyche or compromising their decisions. Mental invincibility thrives not on naive trust, but on disciplined foresight. Mental invincibility also requires the management of expectations. Most people suffer not because of events themselves, but because reality fails to align with their hopes, fantasies, or assumptions. Mentally invincible individuals cultivate realistic expectations, understanding that disappointment is inevitable if expectations are inflated or unfounded. By aligning expectation with reality, they reduce emotional volatility, maintain composure, and create space to respond effectively rather than react destructively. This discipline of the mind ensures that external events, no matter how chaotic or painful, cannot destabilize inner fortitude. Reflection is an equally indispensable practice. A mind that does not evaluate its actions, decisions, and thought patterns remains vulnerable to repetition of errors. Mentally invincible individuals engage in deliberate reflection, reviewing successes and failures alike to extract lessons. This process is unsparing. No mistake is excused, no pattern overlooked, and no emotional rationalization allowed to cloud insight. Reflection transforms experience into intelligence, fortifies the mind against repeated errors, and sharpens judgment. Without this practice, even a naturally strong mind erodes under cumulative oversight. Finally, acceptance of mortality and impermanence solidifies mental resilience. The mentally invincible understand that all circumstances, possessions, and even relationships are transient. By internalizing the temporary nature of life's events, they avoid the emotional quagmire of attachment, fear, and desperation. Mortality is neither to be feared nor ignored. It is a motivator, a lens through which priorities are clarified, and a guide for purposeful action. The acceptance of impermanence frees the mind to focus on what is controllable, actionable, and strategically advantageous. In essence, number 3 emphasizes brutal realism. To be mentally invincible, you must reject comforting illusions, confront limitations, master desire, observe with clarity, embrace necessary isolation, master timing, anticipate betrayal, manage expectations, reflect rigorously, and accept impermanence. These truths are not optional. They are the scaffolding upon which unshakable mental power is constructed. By internalizing reality without distortion, the mind transforms from reactive to strategic, from vulnerable to untouchable, and from ordinary to formidable. This number builds on the internal control introduced earlier, now confronting the world's truths directly. Mental invincibility is not wishful thinking. It is a structured, disciplined engagement with life as it is. The brutal acceptance of reality ensures that no external chaos, manipulation, or betrayal can penetrate the mind's defenses. The mentally invincible do not merely survive in a harsh world. They dominate it quietly, deliberately, and unflinchingly. Number 4. Harnessing emotional control as your greatest weapon. Mental invincibility is not merely the result of understanding reality. It is forged in the mastery of emotion. Most people live at the mercy of their feelings, reacting impulsively, letting fear dictate decisions, allowing anger to cloud judgment, and permitting desire to override strategy. Emotions are raw power, but untrained power is destructive. The mentally invincible recognize this truth. The mind that cannot command its emotions is a mind that cannot command reality. Emotional control is not suppression. It is disciplined navigation, turning instinct into leverage rather than weakness. The first principle of emotional mastery is observation without judgment. Most individuals are entangled in immediate responses, anger, envy, panic, or elation, without understanding their origin or consequence. Mentally invincible individuals pause, observe, and analyze. They dissect the impulse, question its validity, and assess the potential impact of acting upon it. This awareness alone creates distance between stimulus and response, opening the possibility of deliberate rather than reactive action. By observing emotion without surrendering to it, the mind transforms internal chaos into clarity and potential advantage. Next is the understanding of fear. Fear is the mind's natural alarm system, but when unregulated, it becomes a prison. Ordinary individuals interpret fear as a warning or an excuse to retreat, often freezing in indecision or fleeing in panic. Mentally invincible individuals confront fear head-on. They identify its source, acknowledge its presence, and use it as a compass for action. Fear signals risk, but also opportunity. The moments that challenge us most are often the moments that define us. By controlling their response to fear, they gain access to situations that paralyze others. Exploiting hesitation as leverage while maintaining composure, anger and frustration, when unchecked, are equally debilitating. They distort perception, cloud judgment, and provoke impulsive reactions that erode strategy. The mentally invincible, however, treat anger as a tool rather than a master. They channel it into focused energy, directing the intensity toward preparation, persistence, and tactical advantage rather than reckless confrontation. This controlled application transforms a potentially destructive emotion into an engine for productivity and influence. The key is detachment. Recognize the emotion, respect its energy, but never let it dictate your immediate response. Equally critical is the management of desire. Desire, craving, and longing are powerful motivators, yet they can blind the mind and compromise judgment. Those who are mentally invincible recognize that the pursuit of pleasure, status, or approval is not inherently dangerous, but unrestrained attachment to these desires is. They cultivate the discipline to delay gratification, the patience to act strategically, and the focus to channel passion into objectives that serve long-term goals rather than short-term impulses. Desire becomes a compass rather than a chain, guiding action without dictating it. Another crucial component is empathy without attachment. Emotional intelligence is a weapon when wielded correctly. The mentally invincible read people, anticipate reactions, and exploit social dynamics, but they do not surrender themselves to others' moods or opinions. They cultivate an understanding of human emotion for strategic engagement, not for dependency. By observing others' fears, ambitions, and weaknesses, they anticipate behavior and influence outcomes, all while maintaining autonomy over their own emotional state. Emotional intelligence without attachment is power disguised as insight. Resilience under emotional strain is also indispensable. Life's challenges, betrayal, loss, humiliation, and unexpected crises are inevitable. Ordinary minds crumble under these pressures. They overreact, obsess, or collapse. Mentally invincible individuals experience these stresses without losing their core equilibrium. This is not emotional numbness. It is calibrated endurance. They feel, process, and act, but never allow the intensity of circumstances to destabilize strategy. By maintaining composure under duress, they preserve decision-making clarity and psychological advantage even when chaos surrounds them. The mentally invincible also master patience in the face of provocation. Humans are naturally reactive. They seek immediate retaliation, gratification, or validation. Ordinary responses often escalate conflicts, undermine credibility, or expose vulnerability. The disciplined mind, however, waits. They understand that timing, leverage, and positioning matter far more than instantaneous action. Patience allows observation, calculation, and the preparation of countermeasures. By resisting the urge to act impulsively, they convert provocation into advantage, turning situations that ensnare others into opportunities to assert control. Self-awareness is another pillar of emotional mastery. The mind that understands its own triggers, biases, and habitual responses gains a critical edge. Mentally invincible individuals maintain an internal audit. They scrutinize how emotion influences perception, how desire colors judgment, and how fear limits action. This meta-awareness allows them to intercept destructive patterns, adjust strategy in real time, and maintain an operational advantage over both themselves and others. Emotional mastery is impossible without this level of self-knowledge. Gratitude and discipline may seem incongruent with mental toughness, yet they are essential. The mind that recognizes value, appreciates progress, and maintains order is less susceptible to distraction, envy, and impulsivity. Gratitude is not sentimental indulgence. It is a framework for perspective, ensuring the mind prioritizes effectively. Discipline structures emotional energy, directing it purposefully rather than letting it dissipate randomly. Together, they cultivate a mental climate in which power grows sustainably rather than chaotically. Lastly, emotional detachment from outcomes solidifies invincibility. Attachment to success, recognition, or specific results creates vulnerability. Mentally invincible individuals act with focus, strategy, and intensity, but they do not tie their sense of equilibrium to outcomes. By doing so, they remain psychologically unassailable regardless of external fortune, maintaining the freedom to pivot, adapt, and persist where others falter. Emotional detachment is not apathy. It is the armor that preserves clarity, energy, and strategic advantage. Number 4 demonstrates that mental invincibility is forged as much internally as it is externally. Emotional mastery transforms vulnerability into strength, reaction into strategy, and chaos into leverage. By observing emotion without surrendering, confronting fear without paralysis, channeling anger productively, managing desire, reading others without attachment, enduring stress, exercising patience, cultivating self-awareness, practicing gratitude and discipline, and detaching from outcomes, the mind becomes a force impossible to destabilize. Mental fortitude is therefore not the absence of emotion, but the artful control and redirection of it. In essence, mastering emotion is the bridge between understanding reality and taking decisive, unstoppable action. Those who command their inner world command the outer world. Their invincibility is rooted not in circumstances, but in the unshakable dominion of mind over impulse. Emotional control transforms ordinary individuals into tactical, unassailable operators within life's complex battlefield. This is the essence of mental invincibility, feeling without surrender, acting without compromise, and existing in a state of calibrated, silent power. Number 5. Strategic isolation. How solitude strengthens the mind. One of the most misunderstood tools of mental invincibility is solitude. Many fear it, equating isolation with loneliness, weakness, or social inadequacy. In reality, strategic isolation is a cornerstone of mental mastery. It allows the mind to detach from the noise, distractions, and emotional turbulence of the external world, providing a sanctuary in which clarity, creativity, and psychological resilience can flourish. To become mentally invincible, one must learn not merely to endure solitude, but to seek it, structure it, and leverage it strategically. The first step is reframing solitude as empowerment rather than punishment. Humans are inherently social, yet they are also easily swayed by the opinions, desires, and judgments of others. Ordinary minds constantly seek validation, acceptance, and approval, which compromises independent thought and amplifies vulnerability. Mentally invincible individuals recognize that distance from external influence is not a deprivation, it is liberation. Solitude allows for unfiltered reflection, the exploration of ideas without interference, and the cultivation of judgment that is entirely one's own. In solitude, the mind can confront uncomfortable truths. Daily life often provides distractions that shield individuals from the realities of their own limitations, fears, and biases. Without the interruptions of external chatter, the mind is forced to face itself honestly. This confrontation with internal truth is both brutal and transformative. Mentally invincible individuals use solitude to analyze failures, scrutinize patterns of behavior, and identify vulnerabilities. They do not shy away from discomfort. They embrace it, knowing that growth emerges from the rigorous examination of reality unfiltered by denial or external comfort. Solitude also sharpens focus. Mental invincibility is grounded in the ability to maintain attention on high-value objectives without distraction. In a world saturated with stimuli, social media, endless communication, noise from acquaintances, ordinary minds scatter their energy. Isolation removes these extraneous inputs, forcing concentration and enabling depth of thought. It is in these uninterrupted moments that strategies are honed, insights crystallize, and foresight is cultivated. Solitude is the crucible in which attention is tempered into a weapon. Equally critical is the role of solitude in emotional regulation. As explored in previous numbers, unregulated emotion destabilizes the mind. Social interactions are often triggers for reactive emotion: envy, irritation, fear of judgment, or the pressure to conform. By strategically removing oneself from these triggers, the mind gains the opportunity to practice emotional control without interference. Mentally invincible individuals use periods of isolation to meditate on their responses, rehearse composure under stress, and strengthen internal equilibrium. Emotional resilience, cultivated in solitude, becomes automatic when re-engaging with the unpredictable external world. Moreover, strategic isolation enhances self-sufficiency. Ordinary individuals rely heavily on external reinforcement for motivation, validation, and guidance. The mentally invincible cultivate the ability to derive direction and energy internally. Solitude teaches the mind that it can generate purpose, strategy, and clarity independently. This self-reliance is a critical component of invincibility. When external support falters, the mind that is trained to function autonomously continues to operate effectively, without compromise or hesitation. Solitude is also a testing ground for creativity and innovation. The mentally invincible understand that extraordinary solutions rarely emerge from groupthink or consensus. Originality requires mental space, free from the conformity pressures of social environments. In isolation, ideas can develop without judgment, plans can take shape without compromise, and strategies can evolve without dilution. Solitude, therefore, is not an escape. It is an environment that amplifies ingenuity, foresight, and tactical vision. Another advantage of strategic isolation is perspective. The constant immersion in social environments tends to skew perception. Opinions, emotions, and behaviors of others color reality, often leading to misjudgment or misalignment of priorities. Mentally invincible individuals use solitude to recalibrate, returning to an internal reference point rooted in logic, observation, and strategic reasoning. This perspective allows them to evaluate social interactions, opportunities, and threats with clarity, detached from external biases and pressures. Yet, solitude is not synonymous with total withdrawal from society. It is selective, intentional, and structured. The mentally invincible balance isolation with engagement. They emerge from solitude to act decisively, informed by their insights, fortified by internal clarity, and uncompromised by the impulsivity that often governs social interaction. Solitude becomes the preparation ground for action, a place where plans are sharpened, contingencies considered, and mental fortitude strengthened before confronting the unpredictable world. Discipline in maintaining solitude is essential. The human mind resists prolonged periods without stimulation or social contact, often seeking distractions or immediate gratification. Mentally invincible individuals cultivate the habit of entering isolation with purpose and exiting with insight. They schedule time for reflection, strategy, and mental rehearsal, treating solitude as a structured practice rather than passive idleness. This disciplined approach maximizes the psychological benefits and ensures that periods of isolation translate into tangible mental growth. Finally, solitude fosters mastery over personal narrative. Ordinary individuals often allow others' perceptions and expectations to define their identity and decisions. Strategic isolation gives the mentally invincible the freedom to examine their life narrative, question assumptions, and align their identity with their values and objectives. It is in these moments that confidence, authenticity, and psychological sovereignty are forged. By controlling their internal narrative, mentally invincible individuals ensure that external forces cannot easily manipulate, distract, or destabilize them. Number 5 demonstrates that mental invincibility is strengthened not only by external mastery, but also by internal environment. Strategic isolation is a deliberate act of mental training. It enhances self-sufficiency, focus, creativity, perspective, emotional control, and personal narrative. Through solitude, the mind develops independence, clarity, and resilience, preparing it to operate effectively in the unpredictable social landscape. The mentally invincible are not dependent on others for guidance, validation, or stability. They cultivate these qualities within themselves, using isolation as a forge to temper their intellect and resolve. In essence, the power of solitude lies in intentional engagement with one's own mind. It is the deliberate withdrawal that produces clarity, the disciplined stillness that fosters insight, and the controlled distance that cultivates invincibility. Those who master the art of strategic isolation emerge stronger, sharper, and more capable than those who are constantly entangled in external noise. Mental invincibility, therefore, is as much about the spaces we create within as it is about the battles we face outside. Number 6, the art of controlled ruthlessness, protecting your mind at all costs. The final truth of mental invincibility is the mastery of controlled ruthlessness. To be mentally unbreakable is not merely to endure, reflect, or plan. It is to act decisively and without hesitation when circumstances demand it. This is not cruelty for its own sake, nor is it mindless aggression. It is a deliberate strategy, an internal code that ensures your mind remains sovereign, your purpose unchallenged, and your focus uncompromised. The mentally invincible understand that the world does not reward passivity. It rewards those who act with precision, clarity, and relentless resolve. Controlled ruthlessness begins with the recognition that mental invincibility often provokes resistance. As one develops clarity, independence, and strength, it is inevitable that others, whether through envy, fear, or the need for dominance, will challenge, undermine, or attempt to manipulate. Ordinary minds react emotionally, becoming defensive, angry, or desperate to appease. The mentally invincible respond differently. They assess, prioritize, and act. They do not retaliate impulsively, nor do they tolerate unnecessary disruption. Instead, they apply measured, calculated responses that neutralize threats efficiently and without wasted energy. At its core, controlled ruthlessness is about boundary enforcement. Mental invincibility demands the ability to define what is acceptable and what is not. This applies to both external interactions and internal thought processes. The mentally invincible are ruthless in rejecting distractions, irrational fears, and manipulative influences. They do not allow casual negativity, petty conflicts, or emotional chaos to infiltrate their decision-making. Every mental resource, attention, focus, energy is preserved for high-value objectives, ensuring that no one and nothing dilutes their power. Decision-making under controlled ruthlessness is decisive and unambiguous. Indecision is a vulnerability. Those who hesitate allow doubt, manipulation, and chaos to take root. Mentally invincible individuals cultivate the ability to make choices quickly and with confidence, relying on prepared strategies, foresight, and internal clarity. They understand that hesitation breeds weakness and that action, even in uncertainty, is often the most powerful form of defense. Every decision becomes a reinforcement of mental sovereignty, a declaration that the mind will not be coerced, distracted, or undermined. Controlled ruthlessness also encompasses emotional detachment. Ordinary minds are swayed by sentimentality, obligation, or the fear of confrontation. Mentally invincible individuals cultivate the capacity to act without being ruled by emotions that compromise effectiveness. This does not mean emotional absence. Rather, it is disciplined emotional management. They acknowledge feelings, but they do not allow them to dictate action. By mastering emotional detachment, they maintain clarity even in high-pressure situations, making choices that serve long-term objectives rather than immediate comfort or social approval. Strategic elimination of unnecessary influences is another facet of controlled ruthlessness. The mentally invincible recognize that not all relationships, ideas, or commitments are conducive to growth or protection. They are willing to sever ties, discard outdated beliefs, and eliminate recurring distractions. This may provoke discomfort or resistance, but it is a necessary part of safeguarding mental invincibility. By curating their environment, both external and internal, they reduce entropy, sharpen focus, and reinforce resilience. The capacity to remove what weakens you without hesitation or regret is an essential element of unbreakable psychology. Mentally invincible individuals also anticipate threats before they materialize. Controlled ruthlessness is proactive, not reactive. They study patterns of human behavior, identify potential challenges, and prepare responses in advance. This foresight ensures that when conflict arises, it is met with calculated action rather than panic. Their minds are like well-fortified strongholds. Every potential point of intrusion is examined, every vulnerability addressed, and every contingency accounted for. In this way, mental invincibility is not a passive state. It is an active, deliberate construction maintained through vigilance, strategy, and uncompromising discipline. An often overlooked aspect of this ruthlessness is self-imposed accountability. The mentally invincible are relentless not only toward external threats, but also toward their own weaknesses. They identify areas where discipline falters, where focus wavers, and where fear encroaches. Then, with the same controlled ruthlessness they apply to the world, they act to correct, reinforce, and strengthen themselves. This internal vigilance ensures that they remain adaptive, resilient, and perpetually aligned with their objectives. Self-mastery is inseparable from invincibility. Another critical application is the ability to use ruthlessness strategically in social interactions. Influence, persuasion, and leadership require understanding human nature and acting decisively when necessary. Mentally invincible individuals recognize the stakes of social dynamics and are willing to assert themselves in ways that command respect and establish authority. Yet, they do so without unnecessary aggression. They apply power where it matters, in proportion to the threat, and always in service of long-term objectives. This selective ruthlessness preserves energy, maintains psychological stability, and reinforces strategic advantage. Finally, mental invincibility culminates in the alignment of controlled ruthlessness with purpose. Strength without direction is chaos. Decisiveness without clarity is impulsiveness. The mentally invincible integrate their ruthless discipline into a coherent strategy, guided by goals, principles, and long-term vision. Every act, every boundary, every decision serves the overarching purpose of maintaining sovereignty over mind, focus, and action. By combining discipline, clarity, foresight, emotional control, and calculated ruthlessness, the mentally invincible become impervious to manipulation, resilient to adversity, and unshakable in their pursuit of mastery. Number 6 emphasizes that ultimate mental invincibility is achieved not through passive endurance or mere self-awareness, but through disciplined, controlled, and strategic ruthlessness. The mind becomes an impenetrable fortress when every decision, every boundary, and every action is guided by deliberate strategy rather than reactive impulse. Those who master this principle move through life untouchable, their focus uncompromised, their purpose unassailable, and their psychology fortified against the chaos, unpredictability, and challenges of the world. To become mentally invincible is to embrace these 15 harsh truths fully: the inevitability of adversity, the necessity of self-reliance, the power of foresight, the strategic use of perception, emotional mastery, disciplined solitude, and the art of controlled ruthlessness. Each truth builds upon the others, creating a composite of psychological resilience that is rare, formidable, and profoundly effective. Mental invincibility is not inherited. It is cultivated intentionally and relentlessly. It is a process of transformation, turning every challenge, every interaction, and every internal struggle into fuel for unbreakable mastery. Those who internalize these truths emerge not merely stronger, but fundamentally untouchable, psychologically sovereign, strategically adept, and prepared to navigate the complexities of life with the confidence, clarity, and decisiveness that define true mastery of the mind. To achieve this state is to command not only oneself, but also the very dynamics of influence, power, and action in a world that is otherwise unpredictable and uncontrollable. Mental invincibility, therefore, is the ultimate defense and the ultimate weapon. The mind, perfected through discipline, clarity, and controlled ruthlessness, becomes unstoppable.